So this is another factor that plays into your hydration, and that's sports drinks. So I'm going to spend some time going into some math regarding sports drinks. If it gets a little bit overwhelming, just take your time, work through it. This is more for people who really want to understand why they're drinking a sports drink, why they're drinking a certain type of sports drink, and how they can strategically approach their hydration and rehydration. So this is just a rule of thumb. Generally speaking, if the intensity of the training is low or the bout of exercise is less than 60 to 90 minutes, usually water is best. And that gets back to some of the things we talked about in the carbohydrate lecture, to say that if your carbohydrate stores are just fine, well stocked, then needing to restock with more sugar isn't really necessary in a 60 to 90 minute time frame. And also, if your intensity is pretty low, you're unlikely to utilize all of your carbohydrate in that setting. However, if the intensity is high and the athlete is going beyond 60 to 90 minutes or has the potential to do so, then a sports drink may be beneficial. Now here's the key. The benefit of the sports drink is that you can consume fluid and carbohydrate and electrolytes all in one source. Whereas with food, you don't necessarily get the fluid intake at the same time as you're getting that carbohydrate intake. So going back again to that carbohydrate lecture, remember, carbohydrate is the premium fuel. So the purpose of the sports drink is to replenish the fuel that we've used during the competition and during the training. So we talked about the body can only really digest 30 to 60 grams per hour, so that's about what we want to do. We're also trying to maintain fluid balance, so we want to prevent that 1 to 2% dehydration. So sports drinks can do both. But you also consider that there's a lot of electrolytes, so sodium, chloride, potassium, that are lost in sweat that aren't accounted for in water. So I want to take you step by step through each of the factors that may play a role in choosing to do to consume a sports drink or not to do a sports drink. Again, the math can get a little tricky. Press pause, take your time if you want to follow along. So on the left, you'll see a nutrition label for a very common sports drink. In this particular case, that's a 32-ounce bottle, and you can see with the serving size, really the math comes out to be about 2.6 servings per container, but they just estimate at 2.5. But it's a 32-ounce bottle. So in that first line, what you'll see is a 32-ounce bottle. So 1 ounce is 30 milliliters. So 32 times 30 gives us 960 milliliters. So what we're going to say is that 960 is about 1 liter of fluid per bottle. Now remember, our example athlete, they had a sweat rate of about 1.3 liters of fluid per hour. So what you can see is a 32-ounce bottle of fluid per hour would give an adequate amount of fluid for preventing that 1 to 2% dehydration. Now again, that athlete could also be taking some water at the same time, and so we don't need to hit right at our fluid loss during the competition, but at least we're not getting too far behind. Now I want to move over to the carbohydrate content, because that's the key. Really, a sports drink is carbohydrate and electrolyte. That's what the key to all of it is about. So in this 12-ounce serving, there was 22 grams of carbohydrate. In a 32-ounce bottle, there was about 58 grams of carbohydrate. Now, if you remember, we said a 32-ounce bottle is about 1 liter. About 1 liter per hour was a good amount of fluid to be taking in for this particular athlete. In the example that we talked about, we needed about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour because that's what the body can digest. Well, lo and behold, it comes out to about 58 grams of carbohydrates. This is not by mistake. Scientists created the drink to serve the purpose, and now you understand the physiology behind why it's designed the way it is. So in this case, a 32-ounce bottle would be enough to give adequate carbohydrates during the time frame that you would like it. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention is the carbohydrate percentage, because this is something that isn't talked about quite a bit, but it is important. So we talked about 32-ounce serving being about 1 liter of fluid, and 1 liter is the same thing as 1,000 milliliters. Well, in that 1 liter of fluid, there's 58 grams of carbohydrates like we talked about on the last slide. Now, if we say 58 grams over 1,000 milliliters, that gives you about a 5.9% carbohydrate solution. And we know that generally we want the carbohydrate solutions to be somewhere between 6 and 8. So this is right on target. The reason why that's important is anything over 8% is a little bit too heavy on the stomach, can make the stomach feel a little bit full and bloated. So we like to stay below that 8%, and in that 6% is ideal. So we can see that this sports drink, if using it to replenish your carbohydrate stores and fluids at the same time, has a good percentage and would be a good option if the setting calls for it. If you're doing a 30-minute workout, using a carbohydrate solution is probably not necessary. And if you are a young child with a short practice, definitely a carbohydrate solution would not be necessary. So one of the last things that I wanted to point out was that sports drink, I wanted to compare it to some of the IV fluid drinks that you'll see out on the market. And really what it's talking about is comparing the carbohydrates in one and the sodium in the other. So in the sports drink, the carbohydrate is high because it's intended to be used in someone who's doing prolonged exercise because they're burning up all of their carbohydrate stores. So you want to use that sports drink when your activity is long or you have multiple sessions in a day or you're at high intensity. Where you want to use those liquid IV type products is when you're just trying to replenish similar to water, but you want a little flavor. And what happens is, because it has a little bit of carbohydrate in the form of glucose and a lot of sodium, those solutes bring the fluids with them and allow them to be transported into the bloodstream a little bit more rapidly. So the liquid IV products are good substitutes for water, but water's just fine. But they are not great substitute for the sports drink because the point of the sports drink is to have carbohydrates. So the sugar actually has a specific goal in this situation. All right, I know that was a lot of math. I just wanted to explain everything regarding sports drinks and how we measure our sweat rates and estimate our fluid losses. Hopefully that's been helpful. We'll see you in the next talk.